how does public housing impact us as property investors and the actual properties that we end up purchasing? Now, this snippet of content is going to be an extract from our 90 minutes of no cost advanced property investment training. This is the link here on the top of the screen for you to dive into that training, straight through if you'd like. But I wanted to take you through this graphic here because this explains to us how the street level concentrations of public housing in every street across Australia versus the suburb overall, it's telling us how those street level concentrations are impacting property values for the properties in those streets. Okay, what we can see here is if we think of and consider, property values across the suburb medians at 100 percentile. Okay, that is at the 100 percentile line. What this is showing us, and I'll move me out of the way here, is when there is 0% public housing in the street, you would expect to pay for the blue, we're in the capital cities, and for the gold, we're in the regional, inner regional areas. So when there's 0% public housing in the street, you would actually expect to pay 25%, 125% of the suburb median, 25% above the suburb median for properties in those street areas. Okay, if you come down to zero to just over, so not 0%, but just over 0% through to 3.3% public housing, you'd expect to pay 108% of the suburb median, all the way down to 18% or more in public housing, and you would expect to pay 20% less than the suburb median. So when you're going into a suburb, you're looking at a property, you might be online and you're doing this remotely. You are looking at a property and you're thinking, wow, this is a bargain. And if you don't know this information, you might actually be overpaying for the property in that street. You might be paying 10% less than the suburb median, but based on the properties located right next door, you are actually overpaying for this property. Public housing has a dramatic impact, as we can see here, on the value of the properties that you are looking at, what you should be paying for them, and then we've found also a very close correlation between this public housing value and the ongoing growth of a property. Now, this is research that we did in 2013. We have evolved it on from that point. This is some software tools, etc., that we have here at Ripehouse Advisory. What we're looking for in this particular screen is the suburb here in Lavington. You can see here in Lavington, we've got 105 properties on the market. Okay, there's a lot of properties on the market there. It's actually in the suburb, it's an area of Albury-Wodonga, which is on the Victorian and New South Wales border. Now, what we are seeing here are shaded areas. These are street areas of around 200 dwellings. All right, the darker the red shading, we can see over here on the right that there's 4% public housing in the suburb, 4.4% in the local government area overall, and 4.4% in New South Wales overall. So this suburb has pretty much, average levels of public housing. But the really scary thing is when we turn that overlay off and we turn it back on again, there's no real public housing over in this western pocket of the suburb, okay? But when we head over here on the east of this highway through here, we've got very large and scary clusters of public housing. And if you can remember, how public housing impacts value of properties that we want to pay, there's a dramatic change in the price landscape based on the levels of this public housing. All right, in this particular cluster, we've got 30.8% public housing. All right, it's off the charts over here. We would expect to pay 20% less or even more than the suburb median if we were buying in this cluster. This one down here, 18.6. This one here, 14.1. This one down here, 16.1. So we need to know these clusters. Let's look at this property here, right in the smack bang of this very high cluster of public housing. We might zoom in a little bit there. Got two properties on the market. I'm going to now move over into a map, which is part of our private advisory tools, which shows you each individual property that is in public housing. This is critical information that we need to know, because if we were to go and buy this property, even sight unseen, but even driving past it, sometimes you can't pick these things. Remember, we've got 30% public housing in this cluster. If you actually look at the individual properties, now this is extremely difficult information for us to get hold of. And I give a lot of credit here to Will here in the office, who's an expert at finding this type of information. But this is actually identifying to us which individual dwellings in this cluster are public housing. All right, you can remember this cluster. It's broken up if we actually zoom in a little bit deeper. you can see that there's a street cluster here, and then we've got all these properties over here. If we go in zoom, all these properties here, no public housing really whatsoever. But all around this property are all public housing dwellings. Scary, scary stuff. Okay. Public housing does a lot of good for our community, but as a property investor, I would prefer not to have my property surrounded by all of this public housing. Now, the general rule that I like to adhere of is we don't want to be buying in these clusters of public housing, okay? It's the obvious. But we also don't want to be buying between the clusters of public housing and the main drivers of utility in the area, okay? So if there's a train station here, we don't want to be basically living here because these people might walk down this, what's it called? Dick Road. They'll walk down Dick Road, and they might cut across the park here through these houses, through these roads, and they might want to get to the main intersection where they catch the bus. Okay, I don't really want to be buying an investment property here around this public housing or on this thoroughfare that they walk down through the park, cutting across to get to our bus stop. Look, I'm not being judgmental here. I'm just really trying to be strategic as an investor and placing ourselves in clusters of properties away from undesirable factors in many cases. And this is a mass generalization. Sometimes we have to make these as property investors, but I really wanted to make this point today. Public housing has a dramatic impact on the price we should be paying for a property. If you want more details about this training, jump across to training.ripehouseadvisory.com.au/training-ph. Okay, that's a bit of a mouthful. You can see the link there. Jump across to the training. I will be putting a link to this training in the comments below. I'd love to hear your feedback. Any questions, I'm here for anything that you've got to ask about public housing or property investment in general. If you'd like to join our Facebook group of over about 1,500 other property investors who are all about the data and all about the research and generating wealth from property investment, check out High Performance Property Investment. It's a Facebook group over there. Love your work. Good luck. Hope this has been useful. Thank you.